Welcome to the Knowsys SAT strategy session. In this session, we'll review the results from your practice exam, so you'll want to follow along on your score report. Okay, so let's start at the top of your results where it says Diagnostic History. In this section, if you'll focus on that top row, there you'll see the date of your test, the diagnostic, the name of the test you took, and then you've got your two SAT scores, your reading and writing section score, which is 200 to 800, and your math section score, which is 200 to 800, and then your total. This is your SAT score, which has a range of 400 to 1600 points. You will also see test scores for math, reading, and writing. Okay, and we'll talk about those in a second. Okay, so underneath the titles then, you see the date of your test, the name of your test, and then your actual score. So what did you make on the verbal section, the reading and writing? Between 200 and 800, my sample student has a 510. What did you have? Math, between 200 and 800, again, my student has a 510. So that means her total is a 1020. Okay, on the right-hand side, under the test scores, you've got three separate test scores, and each one represents a raw score, not the scaled SAT score. Okay, so having got a glimpse of your SAT score on this practice exam, you're probably thinking, well, what's a good score? Right? How did I do compared to everybody else? So let's review a couple of factors in what determines a good score. Obviously, some scores are just flat good. If you've got in the 1400 and above range, you've got a good score. It doesn't matter what grade you're in or anything else, it's a good score. But let's say you're not quite there. What determines good? Well, the first thing is your grade level. Obviously, if you're a 9th grader taking this practice exam, we're not expecting you to score as well as you will, hopefully, when you're a 10th grader or an 11th grader. All right, so grade level is one determining factor. The second factor is college choice. Where do you want to go to school? Right? Where are you going to apply? Where would you love to go to university? Obviously, the more selective and rigorous the program or the university, the higher your score needs to be. So if you're trying to apply to an Ivy League school and you've got an average score, not very likely to get admitted. And just the reverse, if you're applying to an average university and you've got an average score, then hey, you're probably actually looking pretty good for admission. It'll be other factors that'll determine whether or not you get admitted. Okay, one more factor that determines good is scholarships. Right? The more scholarship money you want, the higher you want that score to be, because that's what's going to help you stand out in comparison to all the other applicants for those scholarships. And some scholarships will actually have cutoff scores, others won't, but they'll have you submit your score, and obviously the higher your score, the more likely you are to be awarded a scholarship. Okay, so a good rule of thumb for determining what's a good score is you want to try to beat your top school's average score. So whatever your top reach of a school is, right, when you take a look at their scores, you want to average it, and then you want to be at or above that average. That way, when you submit your application package, your score doesn't scream, you might not be able to cut it. It says you fit in with everybody else, and then they look at other factors in your application to determine whether or not you're going to be a good fit for that university. Okay, so now let's switch gears for a second and talk about a couple of general preparation tips. The first thing we recommend is that you take both the SAT and the ACT. You never know which one you're going to do better on. Almost every university takes both, and it gives you one more shot of meeting some qualification cutoff. So, for example, SAT, let's say you took it last Saturday. Well, let's say you scored an 82nd percentile. If you were to go in and take the ACT this Saturday, you're likely to score right around there. But maybe you scored the 79th percentile or the 85th percentile. It probably won't be exactly the same. There'll be a slight variability. It'll depend on the test. It'll depend on the day. It'll depend on how you feel, what you did the night before. There's lots of factors that'll determine that variability, but it's highly unlikely you're going to walk in and take the SAT, score an 80th percentile, then the next weekend walk in and take the ACT, and all of a sudden you're like, ta-da, 95th percentile. Right? It just doesn't happen. So you're going to be within this range of variability, and you want to give yourself every opportunity to meet a cutoff score, because what if that scholarship application requires an 83rd percentile and you just missed it on the SAT but you just got it on the ACT, or vice versa? So that's what we're recommending. Make sure you take both exams. Okay, second general preparation tip is for you to know that there is no set order of difficulty on the SAT. So SAT, ACT, PSAT, none of them have a set order of difficulty. That means that easy, medium, and hard problems are jumbled on the test. And that's a change on this recent exam. Right? So that means you need to get used to guessing on and flagging hard problems and then returning to them at the end of the section if you've got time. But you also need to get used to it psychologically, because in most of your coursework you probably have exams that go in order of easy, medium, hard. You think about the last math exam you had, right? Probably the last couple of questions on the test were the hardest, and that won't be true on the SAT. Okay, and then the last general preparation tip I want to talk about right now is for you to realize that there is no wrong answer penalty on the SAT. Again, this is a change. That means you're going to want to guess on every single problem. Leave no answer blank. So as we look at the rest of this report, you need to be asking yourself, did I leave anything blank? Because if you did, it wasn't strategic. You should always put an answer, even if you don't want to spend any time trying to solve the problem because it's beyond your skill set. Okay, so at this point, we usually get a lot of questions. Does preparation help? Can you really improve your score? And the answer is definitely. Good preparation definitely helps. Good preparation is going to involve strategic methods, solid review of the content, and vocabulary building. All right, you're going to need all of those pieces, and that's what's going to factor into really raising your score. A little bit later on, we'll talk about some of the resources that Knowsys has available to help you get ready for this exam. We've talked about what makes a good score. Now let's talk about what makes your scores competitive, right? Are you where you want to be for the universities that you're interested in? All right, here we've got several universities listed. All right, hopefully there's some you're interested in, but if not, we'll tell you where to find more information. These are the SAT score range for the middle 50th% of students who were accepted at these particular universities. So what that means is, let's say 100 students applied to Baylor. Well, the middle 50 of the group had scores between 1210 and 1380. That means 25 were below 1210 and 25 were above 1380. You can see the math, you can see the reading, so you can see the scores and you can look down. Let's say you're interested in UNT, right? Are your scores somewhere in that 1070 to 1270 range? Remember, we said a good rule of thumb is to be at the average. So I would average 1070 and 1270, right, and come up with 1170. And then if I want to apply to UNT, I want to be at 1170 or higher so that I know my SAT score isn't going to be a stumbling factor when it comes to submitting my application. Okay, the last column on the page is percent admitted, and this tells you how selective the university is. So what you can see is at Baylor, 44% of the students who applied were admitted. Rice, it was 16%, so obviously Rice is significantly more selective than Baylor. SMU, 49, A&M, 66, so you can see the different percentages there, and that just tells you what your competition looks like at any particular university. Okay, so maybe you're thinking, what about Harvard? What about Duke? What about Notre Dame? What about, well, where you go to get this information is collegeboard.org. They've got a section called College Search, and you're able to type in the university and then find this information over on the left side where it has information about application. It'll show you the SAT scores, the ACT scores, GPA, lots of other information. So that website's incredibly helpful, incredibly useful. Recommend that you spend some time and get familiar with it. Take advantage of that resource that's out there. It's free, it's reputable, you don't have to worry about them doing anything sketchy. Okay, so let's go back to your report and take a look on page 1 at the math evaluation. So what you're going to see is math, and then what you'll find at the top under math is the category and then subcategories of questions. Okay, so that's where we're going to focus first. So at the very top, what you see is the total number of questions in each of these categories. You can see that there are 58 total math questions. That's both sections combined, and those questions are spread across these 4 categories. There are 4 math categories on every SAT exam, and they're basically split up this way, although there might be some variability. Basically, 10% is additional topics, so geometry, trig, complex numbers, unit circle, that kind of thing. So 6 questions, 5 questions will be in that category. 28% advanced math. That's your algebra 2, so it's quadratic equations, polynomials, roots and radicals. About 30% data analysis. That's descriptive statistics, ratios, rates, percents, proportions, probability, reading graphs, that kind of thing. And then another third on heart of algebra. That's basically algebra 1, so it's your linear equations and inequalities, your simultaneous equations, that kind of thing. So those math categories are on every single SAT that you take. The next column that you see is titled correct. This is the number of correct questions, or number of questions you got correct within this particular category or subcategory. So in this case, my sample student, there were 6 additional topics questions. The student got 2 of the 6. The third column is the number of incorrect. So in this case, my student missed 1 of the 6. So it's the number that they actually missed. The fourth column is labeled blank, and that is the number of questions in that category or subcategory that you left blank with no answer. Should you leave any questions blank? Definitely not. Why not? There's no wrong answer penalty, so don't leave anything blank. At least put an answer so that way you have some possibility of lucking into it and getting it correct. And the last column on the page will be incorrectly answered or skipped. So these are the ones that represent either the incorrect or the blank. So it tells you which section and then what question number if you missed it or you skipped it. So this gives you a lot of detail for you to go back and look at your test and figure out where your problem areas were. So let's look down below where it says Heart of Algebra and additional topics, right? What it gives you underneath there is the subcategories for each of those category types. So Heart of Algebra, we said linear equations and inequalities, simultaneous equations. You can see those subcategories down there. You can see what on this particular exam made up additional topics, right? So you can see a lot of detail about the types of questions that are on the exam. Okay, you can also see the details of your performance, so you can see how many you got correct and how many you got incorrect. The next column is how many you left blank, which of course should be 0. So if you look at my sample student here, there's a 3, a 1, a 0. Right, this student was not strategic. Bubble something and move on. And then the next column, percent correct. So in this case, if there were 4 questions, got 1 right, then percent correct is going to be 25%. Okay, so let's talk for a moment about scoring on the SAT. The SAT is essentially scored on a curve. So you get a raw score, and that's based on +1 point for every question you get right. And of course, there was no wrong answer penalty, so it's just how many did you get right. Then they take that raw score and they convert it to that scaled score, the curve score of 200 to 800. That becomes your SAT score. Okay, so what's the highest level of math that's tested on the SAT? What you should have seen in what we just covered was Algebra 2 and Trig. And the bottom line is a lot of students know these concepts, but their difficulty comes in how those concepts are actually tested on the exam. And this is where practice test as well as good preparation will really make a big difference, because you may know, let's say sine, cosine, tangent, but do you know how it's going to be tested on the SAT, how it's going to be tested on the ACT, the PSAT? Good prep materials will help you answer that question so that when you see it, you're not surprised, you're completely comfortable with the format in which the concepts are tested. Okay, so let's look back at the report, and now I want to focus on the subscores. On every SAT exam, you will be given 3 subscores in math. They are Heart of Algebra, those are the Heart of Algebra questions. Passport to Advanced Math, those are the Advanced Math or the Algebra 2 questions. And then the Problem Solving and Data Analysis, and these are the Data Analysis questions. Notice that there's not a subscore for the Additional Topics question. Why not? I don't know. But anyway, these are the 3 subscores that you will have on every single exam, and they are based on a subset of the questions within the 2 math sections on the exam. The other type of score you will see on your score report is a cross-test score. So the same two cross-test scores are on all three sections of the SAT. So you will see it reaches into the math, the reading, and the grammar sections. And it's two pieces: analysis in history, social sciences, and then analysis in science. So analysis in history, social sciences, these will be exactly what it sounds like: questions that have to do with history or social sciences. What that means for math is that they will frame the math equation question in terms of a social sciences concept or in terms of something historical. Analysis in science, maybe they do something with exponents, but it's now dealing with atomic weights. So now it's science. All right, so those are the two cross-test scores that you're going to get. Only a small number of the questions across the exam will fall into these categories, but you will have them on every single SAT that you take. Okay, next I want to look at the math answer analysis. So if you'll find that section on your report. Okay, first you'll see that it's divided into two sections. So the SAT always has two math sections, one with a calculator, one without a calculator. Both sections will contain grid-ins, or student-produced responses. So you can see those in the brown highlight here. Those are the ones where you have to actually generate a numerical answer and then bubble in the number. Within this section on your report, you've got different rows. The first row is Q number. That represents the question number within that section. The second row is labeled ANS. That represents the correct answer for that question in that section. The third row is mark, and mark represents the student answer. So if there is a dash, that means you left it blank. If there is a letter answer, A, B, C, D, or E, that is the answer that you put that is incorrect. And then if there's a plus, that means you got it correct. So if you take a look at my sample here, my student missed number 2. The correct answer was C, the student bubbled A. If you take a look at number 16, the correct answer is 11, and my student didn't put anything in. And your answers may be different, it just depends on which version of the test we're looking at, but the way you read the report will be the same. Okay, now we're going to switch gears and look at the critical reading, and it is set up the same way as the math was, so we'll go through this section a little faster. Okay, in reading, you can see that there are 3 categories of reading questions: information and ideas, which is basically your big picture, your details, your evidence, your vocabulary. Then rhetoric, which is analysis of arguments or the textual structure or the author's purpose. And then synthesis, and there are 2 types of questions that come under synthesis. There's quantitative analysis, which is where you have to answer questions related to a graph in the passage. And then there's analyzing multiple texts. So that's when they've got the paired passages, author 1, author 2, and you have to do compare and contrast on perspectives of those authors. You can see the column starting on the right, total. So in this case, 52 questions in reading comp. That'll always be true. All of the questions are passage-based. So no longer any separate questions about vocabulary that are completely independent of passages. Now all of the questions are related to passages. The next column is correct. So this is the number of questions within that category, subcategory that you got correct. After that, you see how many you missed within that category or subcategory. Then you see the number that you left blank. And should you leave any blank? Should there be anything in that column besides zeros? Hopefully you answered with an emphatic no. There's no wrong answer penalty. You should always mark some answer so that maybe you get it right. Okay, now let's turn our attention from the big reading category to the subcategories: information and ideas, rhetoric, and synthesis. Okay, so skip down below the cross-test and the subscores, and then you can see what are the types of questions that make up rhetoric, or information and ideas, or synthesis questions. So these will be the 3 that are on all of the SAT exams. 3 big categories. You'll have those subcategories of questions, and it's just a matter of how many detailed questions will you have versus how many big picture or purpose questions. Okay, out to the right you can see the details of your performance. So not only the total number of questions, but how many of those you got right and how many you missed. The next column is how many you left blank, and of course all of those should be 0, unlike my sample student here. Okay, and then the last thing we'll focus on here is the percent correct. And just as with the other sections, what you'll see here is if you got 1 out of 2, then 50% correct. So this gives you a feel for your overall performance in those sub-questions. Now, just like on the math, you're going to see cross-test scores. The same 2 cross-test scores are going to be on all 3 sections. So you'll see analysis in history and social sciences and analysis in science. Notice that only 42 of the questions will fall into this category. So not every one of the reading comp passages feeds into this cross-test score. Below that, you see the subscores that are provided for reading. There are 2 subscores, command of evidence and words in context. Command of evidence are the 10 questions that specifically ask you to select the passage piece that actually justifies the answer. So there'll be some question, let's say number 9, will say, with which of the following would the author most likely agree? You pick one. And then number 10 is, which piece of the passage justifies the answer to the question before it? And there will be 4 pieces of the passage quoted, and you will have to select. So that is command of evidence. Words in context is specifically vocabulary. So it will say in line number 4, the word fence most nearly means. A lot of these are words that have multiple meanings. So like fence, obviously when you say that, most people think of a white picket fence, but it could also mean to get rid of stolen goods. Right? It can also mean to spar with somebody else using a blade. Right? So words that have multiple meanings are frequently tested in these specific words and context questions. Notice that only about 20 questions count toward these particular subscores. Then I want you to look down below where it has your reading answers analysis, and we'll take a look at this. It's set up the same way that the math was. There's only 1 reading comp section, so unlike the math, you won't see 2, you'll only see 1 section here. The first row will be the Q number, which is the question number within that section. Second row is ANS, that represents the correct answer for that question number in that section. And the third row is the mark, and that is a plus if you got it correct, a letter if you put a letter that was the wrong one, and then a dash if you left it blank. And of course you should have no dashes because you want to leave nothing blank. Okay, now let's turn our attention to the writing piece. So this is probably on page 2 of your report. Reports vary slightly in pagination depending on how many you missed. Okay, so writing section, you'll see that it's set up the same way that the math and the reading was. Okay, in writing there are 6 different categories. There's development, which represents authors' writing choices. There's effective language use, that's style, tone, word choice. Mechanics, this is actual grammar. Organization, this is how the author actually organized the passage. Sentence structure, which is grammar, and usage, which is grammar. So you can see 3 of the 6 categories are about grammar, and the other 3 are about author's writing style. Okay, the columns going across, the total number of questions, so there are 44 total grammar questions divided among these 6 different categories. After the total, you see the number that you got correct in that particular category or subcategory, followed by the number that you missed in that particular category or subcategory, followed by the number that you left blank. And of course, you shouldn't leave any blank. There should be zeros all the way down that column. Now skip down a bit below the subscores and the cross-test. I want to take a look at the categories because then you can see the subcategories of questions. So under usage questions, right, which is a type of grammar, they ask about pronouns, subject-verb agreement, words and expressions. Mechanics is always punctuation. Do you need a comma, a semicolon, a colon, a dash, right? What do you need in this particular sentence? And then under effective language use, you can see concision, style and tone, and you can keep looking down. So all 6 of the categories will have their subcategories of questions. To the right of that, you see the details of your performance. So you know how many total questions, how many did you get right, and how many did you get wrong. That, of course, is followed by how many did you leave blank, which of course should be 0. then followed by the percent you got correct. So if you got 1 out of 3, then 33% correct in that particular subcategory. Then let's take a look at the subscores. Here there are actually 4 subscores. So there's command of evidence and words in context, just as in the reading comp section. Plus there's expression of ideas and standard English conventions. Expression of ideas is the more writer's craft piece, so development, organization, style, tone. Standard English convention is grammar and idioms, the use of the language. You will also have cross-test scores here, the same two, so the history, social sciences, and the science. And just as in the reading comp, you will have 1 or 2 passages that actually has a graph or graphs that go with it, and the grammar questions will ask about interpreting them, and those would fall into the non-grammar, they would fall into the author's craft development section. Notice that only about 12 of the questions will actually get categorized within these cross-test subscores. Okay, below that, if you look to your writing answer analysis section, right, you will see that there's only 1 section, just as with the reading comp. This is set up the exact same way, so Q number represents the question number within that section. The ANS answer row represents the correct answer for that question number. And the mark row represents your answer. If you got it right, there's a plus. If you missed it, there's the letter. And then if you left it blank, there will be a dash. Okay, now let's look at the essay section. So we've looked at the objective portion of the test. Now let's turn to the essay. So if you go back to page 1 of your report, right underneath the very top section is the essay score piece. And what you'll see is your test date as well as the name of the test, and then 3 subscores for reading, analysis, and writing. Now, the essay on the SAT is optional to College Board. Right, so they let you sign up for the test with the essay or without the essay. So most students are like, well, shoot, I don't want to take the essay, so they don't sign up for it. But many colleges and universities actually require the essay. So we highly recommend that you sign up for the essay unless you absolutely positively know that there is no way any university you ever want to apply to will require the essay. Since most of us aren't prescient and we can't see into the future, it's just safer to go ahead and take it with the essay. If you find out later that you need an essay score, you have to take the entire test again. That means a new fee, a new registration, a new Saturday morning wasted. Right? College Board's happy because they get more money, but you're having to waste time and money taking this test again. Okay, now your essay will be scored by 2 different graders, and each grader will give your essay a score of 0 to 4. So that means your combined possible score is 0 to 8 in each of these 3 categories. The scores from the 2 graders are either going to be the same or no more than 1 apart in each of the categories. So in other words, you can't have one grader say, oh, you've got a 1, and one grader say, you've got a 4. You can't, I mean, it's either good or it's not good. You can't have something that far apart. So you will get 2 different grades, but they will be combined into 1. So if I'm looking at that reading score and I see a 5, I know one grader gave me a 2, one grader gave me a 3. Analysis is 4, so I got a 2 and a 2. Writing is 6, that means I got a 3 and a 3, because the scores have to be that close to each other. The scores are reported separately. They are not part of the total, and they are also not part of your SAT score. So when somebody says what's your SAT score, they're interested in your math and your verbal combined, and then your essay is completely separate from that. Okay, so I want you to take an objective look at your essay. Can you read it? Can a stranger read it? Can a stranger with a limited amount of time and patience read it? Bottom line is, if you can't read your essay, the graders probably couldn't read it either. There's a couple of things that tend to make essays hard to read. One is hand scratch. You know who you are. Some of you, it looks like you write with your feet. Right? The other thing is if it's written too lightly. Because they scan the essays and then send them to the graders, nobody's looking at your original essay. They're scanned. If it's too light, that can make it really hard for the grader to read. So make sure you write dark enough that if it's scanned or faxed, it'll actually be legible. Okay, so there are 3 essay score categories, right? Each one 0 to 8. So the first one is reading. This one is basically, does your essay show that you read and correctly understood the author's position? Right? The second piece is analysis. Does your essay correctly analyze the author's argument and use of rhetoric and evidence to convey the argument? And then the third piece is writing. Does your essay communicate well using standard written English? In other words, maybe you've got perfect understanding, brilliant analysis, but your English is so garbled and so poorly written that it doesn't communicate well. Well, then you would have a high score in reading, a high score in analysis, but a low score in writing. So let's take a look at the essay scores themselves and what they represent. So this would be one grader in one category. They give you the possibility of 0 to 4. A score of 4 is outstanding. A 3 is labeled effective. A 2 is labeled inadequate. And a 1 is, gulp, fundamentally lacking. Major problems. If you received a 0, that means your essay was either off topic or illegible. Right? Those are the only two reasons you get a 0. So the dividing line here is between the 3 and the 2. Right? A 3 or a 4 is a good essay. A 2 and below is a bad essay. Okay, so since your score is a score from 2 different graders, it will be on the scale of 0 to 8. So if you received a 3 in a category, that means one grader gave you a 1 and one gave you a 2. If you have a 7, somebody gave you a 3 and a 4. If you have an 8, you've got a 4 and a 4. You've got the 2 highest possible scores. All right, so what you want to see is a bare minimum of 5, because a 5 says one grader gave you a 3 effective, one grader gave you a 2 inadequate. All right, so you want to see 5, 6, 7, or 8, because otherwise you're in the sketchy, don't write well, something's really wrong area of the essay. Now, if you turn to page 3 of your report, this is where you should see the details about your essay scores. So the first thing you'll see is in bold the total scores in each of the 3 categories. So my student has a reading score of 6 and an analysis score of 5. Below that, what you see is a description of the scores. So what you see is 6. A 6 for this particular student, a 6 is 2 3s, so next time strive for 4s. Right? And what it shows you down below is the SAT description for a level 4 versus a level 3, or the one below it in my case. An analysis of 5, that means they got a 3 and a 2, so we want them to strive for 4s next time. Right? But we give them the score description of a 3 and a 2 so they can see what the grader saw and interpreted their essay, and that's where they got their particular score. Moving on from the essay, I want to talk about a few college timeline highlights. Things that you should be doing now at whatever stage you are to help prepare for SAT, ACT, and PSAT. First thing I recommend is that you complete the SAT question of the day. You can access it at the College Board website. You can also follow it on Twitter. There's an app now available, but bottom line, you should be doing the question of the day. ACT also has a question of the day. As of right now, they don't have an app, but it is available on their website. And then we also recommend that you use the Knowsys SAT question of the day blog, which is on our website at myknowsys.com/blog. The really great thing here is that our blog is searchable by topic. So if you look at your score report and let's say you were weak in circles, you can go to the website, type in circles, and then see all the problems and the explanations, our step-by-step methodical ways to solve things on circles or fractions or triangles or pronouns or whatever the issue is that you need to focus on. So that searchability is actually what makes this a very useful thing for raising your score. The next thing I'd recommend is that you start investigating college and scholarships early, now. Basically, figure out what scholarships are available and their requirements, figure out which ones you might be able to meet, because if you start now, you can actually build your resume intentionally and carefully to make sure you actually qualify for these scholarships. If you wait until the end of your junior year, the beginning of your senior year, and then you're looking this information up, everything's already written in stone. You've either done it or you haven't. Right? You don't have time to kind of sculpt how you're going to present yourself. You don't have time to market yourself. So if you start looking now and you think, oh, okay, well, I could qualify for that Coca-Cola scholarship. All I have to do is X, Y, and Z. Well, then do it so that you will qualify, so that when you're submitting that application as a senior, you actually have a good shot of getting that scholarship. Second thing here, push yourself to more advanced classes, right? Push for a high GPA in the hardest classes you can take. Don't be afraid to get tutoring, get assistance, but bottom line is they'd rather see, for the most part, from our experience talking to admissions officers over the years, they'd rather see that you got a B in a really hard class than an A in a blow-off class. All right, so just make sure that you're pushing yourself to excel. Additionally, take practice exams. Good job starting with this one, right? We recommend that you plan to take one test in the fall, one test in the spring. Right? You don't need to take necessarily every practice exam we offer, but you want to use the practice exams to see whether or not you're actually ready to take the real exam. So, do the preparation work, do the practice exams, get familiar with the test, learn your strengths and weaknesses, improve your weaknesses. That way when you go in to take the real exam, you're ready to maximize your score straight out of the box. And like I just said, practice. It's not enough just to take practice exams, right? You get a little bit of a boost from familiarity. The fact that you've taken the exam before, you've taken this practice test, now you know how the test works, right? So you'll get a little bit of a boost from that. But if you want to see a significant improvement in your score, you have to strengthen your skills. That means doing some work. Right? Whether that's taking a prep course, working on your own, doing self-study, using some of our resources, whatever it is, but it requires some work. It doesn't just happen overnight, and it's not magic. Okay, Knowsys has several self-study aids available, things that'll help you raise your score. First thing I'd recommend is our book, Navigating the SAT. This is a complete SAT, PSAT self-study book. There are two formats. You can buy it in print format via Amazon, or you can buy it as an ebook through Kindle. We also have math practice books, 2 levels, basic math or pre-algebra, and advanced math. And the advanced math is pre-algebra, algebra, geometry. Each one has 150 questions. They're SAT style, so it'll give you practice with the format, with the way the content is actually tested on the exams. Again, 2 different formats here, so you can buy this as a printed book through Amazon, or you can get it as an ebook through Kindle. Right? If it's been a while since you've done some of that pre-algebra, a little bit rusty, I definitely recommend you start with the pre-algebra basic math piece first, and then move to the advanced math. Okay? Third thing that we have is SAT and PSAT vocabulary flashcards. But first, before we talk about that, I want to talk about the importance of vocabulary on these exams. Okay, when the SAT changed most recently, they dropped off sentence completions. So a lot of teachers, counselors, parents, students were like, oh, thank goodness, there's no more vocab on the SAT. Wrong. You know from taking this practice exam that there's plenty of college level vocabulary on this test. The passages are dense, college level reading. So if your vocab is weak, it's going to slow you down, it'll make it hard to understand. Sometimes there's vocabulary in the questions themselves that you don't know the meaning to, and then obviously that'll mess up your ability to answer questions correctly, quickly, accurately. Right? It'll also obviously mess you up on the vocab and context questions, which is one of the particular categories. So you know, bare minimum, you'll have at least 10 of those questions. Right? So questions do still test vocabulary. The passages got even more complex than before, which means there's even more vocabulary embedded in the passage. All right, and you can see a list up there at the top. This is just some that were used on one of the exams that we pulled to look at. Equivocal, mercurial, capricious, loquacious, disparage. Right? If you don't know those words, you need to work on your vocabulary. And improving your vocab will pay off not only on your reading comp, but also in your writing, on your SAT essay, as well as your application essays, college reading. I think you get the point. Right? There's not a place where it's going to hurt. The more you know in terms of vocabulary, the better off you're going to be. Ready? Okay, Knowsys offers 2 levels of vocabulary to help you get ready. We offer an SAT level and a PSAT level. The SAT, if you think about it in terms of like 1 and 2, SAT is level 1, PSAT is level 2. It's the higher level, harder words. So if your vocabulary is already really strong, go for the PSAT flashcards. If you know you really need to beef up your standard vocabulary, start with the SAT. Right? We have this available in a couple of formats. So there's a box set available at Amazon. there are apps available for iTunes and Google Play. And now we actually have a Kindle ebook flashcards version. So whatever way is going to help you study these words and master them, we've got a resource to help you do that. We also have a new category of flashcards that's available either as a box set on Amazon or as an ebook on Kindle, and it is our frequently confused words and homophones. This category is specifically tested on SAT, PSAT, and ACT, and it's things like affect, effect, there, it's, less, fewer, discrete, complement, right? So if you look at any of those examples and you're thinking, ooh, not real sure about that one, right? That this is a completely different kind of vocabulary set to make sure that you're familiar with the words that a lot of people continue to confuse and mess up on, just kind of nonstop. Obviously, knowing these will have a positive effect on your writing. It will also have a positive effect on social media posts, those kinds of things. So this is available and completely separate from vocabulary. Now that we've taken a look at some resources that are available, let's take a look at the timeline. When do you get started? On the bottom line is you get started now. Your goal is to get the test scores that you need by the end of your junior year. So you want to prep for and take the SAT and the ACT in March and April of your junior year. And then, if for some reason at that test you don't get the scores you need, you still have time to review, prepare, and retake the test in May or June. But your bottom line goal is you've done this by the end of your junior year. You've got the score you need before you leave for the summer. What you absolutely do not want to do is wait till the fall of your senior year and create this high-stress, high-stakes testing situation. Because for most universities, the last test you can take is October of your senior year if you want to get your results back in time to submit them for admissions and or for scholarship deadlines. So you absolutely don't want to have to wait until then. You don't want to stress yourself out. Much better to have the score you need by the end of June when you leave for the summer before your senior year. That way, over the summer, you can start working on the rest of your application package. In senior year, you're not stressed about these important scores. Now, if you are a top scoring student, there's one more test you really need to be aware of. The PSAT is important for top scoring students. The only year that it counts is October of your junior year. All juniors who take the PSAT are automatically enrolled in the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. Right, so you're automatically put into this. Top scoring students then will get into this system of National Merit, commended, semifinalist, finalist, and scholar. Right, so if your sophomore PSAT score is an 1100 or higher, we highly recommend that you focus on preparing for the PSAT in your junior year. That way you can maximize your score and hopefully get into this National Merit Commended or higher system where scholarships and recognition are available. If your PSAT score isn't 1100 or higher as a sophomore, it's not the end of the world. That'll be true for most students. Right? What that tells you is the PSAT for you is a practice exam. So you don't need to spend hours and hours all summer long preparing for the PSAT. Right? It's a practice exam. Your goal will be, as we said, to get that SAT and ACT score you need before you leave for the summer leading into your senior year. Okay, what about an athlete? If you're an athlete, you need to register with the NCAA clearinghouse as a junior. And then when you take the SAT or the ACT, you will include the eligibility code for the center, the 9999, so that your scores will automatically be sent to the clearinghouse. This is an important part of the process. In order to go in as a student athlete, right, there will be minimum SAT and ACT scores. They both are sums, so SAT is the sum of the math and the verbal, ACT is the sum of the 4 sections, so English, reading, math, and science, right? And depending on the level of the school, whether it's a Division I or a Division II school, they'll have different qualifying scores, but it's usually some combination of a sliding scale of test scores and GPA in core courses. All right, you can see some details here, but it's all available at the NCAA Clearinghouse website. Now, what about retaking the SAT? Realistically, many students will take the SAT 2 or 3 times, but practically it makes sense to take practice tests until you know that you're ready for the real exam. There's no point going to take the real exam for $50 a pop 2 or 3 times when you can take practice exams, do your preparation, and know when you're actually ready to take the real exam. Now, one of the big misconceptions is retaking the exam will somehow raise your score. And the reality is, unless something really bad happened on test day, retaking the test just probably isn't going to make a big difference unless you do something in between. So if there's no additional preparation, your score is just as likely to go down as it is to go up. Right? So keep that in mind. With preparation, scores go up. Without preparation, they just hover, basically. So the bottom line is good preparation, whether you're doing this through a course, through tutoring, through using the Knowsys resources that are available. Right? It's good preparation, hard work that makes repeating the exam worthwhile. Okay, the next question that often comes up is, what do universities do with multiple scores? If most students take the SAT 2 times or 3 times, how does the university handle that? And the answer is, it depends. Right? Most will take the best score from your math and your verbal from whichever test, put it together and create an SAT score. But it's completely up to the university. So to find out for sure, you call the university admissions department, and you can do this anonymously. You don't have to tell them who you are, and just ask, what do you guys do if I submit an SAT score report that has multiple scores or multiple exam administrations on it? How do you handle multiple SAT scores? And they'll let you know what their policy is. Okay, maybe you've heard about score choice. What is score choice? Well, both the SAT and the ACT have a score choice option. And what that does is that it lets you decide which test administration or administrations do you want to send. So if you take the test in January and then you take it again in March, right, do you want to send just the January scores or just the March scores? The problem is, for a lot of students, they haven't taken our advice, they haven't prepared in between. So January, their math score's higher, and March, their verbal score higher. So they end up having to send both anyway. All right, so there really becomes no score choice. There is also an exception. Some of the more selective universities actually require that you send all of your scores. So for example, if you're applying to Rice in Houston, right, you don't get a score choice. They will say send your complete score report. So you have to be aware that that could happen. The safest thing is for you to assume you're going to have to send all of your scores, which is why if you use the practice test and then you only go take the real exam when you know you're ready and you're going to maximize your score, you won't have to worry about this anyway. Okay, so now I want to turn our attention to the overview of the tests that you have to take in high school. Right, so there's SAT and ACT. These are your college admissions exams. They are, like we said, timeline, spring of your junior year. And your preparation is generally going to be some sort of special course or self-study. Right? Just because you do well in your high school classes, even if your high school is an amazing high school, that doesn't mean you're going to do well on these exams. So you'll want to put some special preparation into it. PSAT exam, this is the national merit test. Again, it's only real October of your junior year, although you may have taken it as a sophomore, even a freshman. Maybe you took it even in junior high, but the only year it counts is October of your junior year. And again, to do well there, to really maximize your score, that's going to require some special direct instruction. All right, so preparation specifically for the exam. Practice exams, like the one you took here, the goal is to give you realistic practice before you go in to take the real exam. You can take them anytime. We offer multiple exams. We recommend you don't overtest. You don't want to take one, every other weekend or something like that. You don't want to burn yourself out, but you want to use them strategically. All right, so you don't have to do any preparation. We do recommend that you do preparation on your own, and then you can use these practice exams as a gauge to see how you're doing. Right? AP exams, a lot of you guys are in AP courses, or you will be, right? Those courses prepare you for a specific exam. So these are specific subjects The goal of those exams is college placement, college credit, so that maybe you don't have to take calculus because you've taken the AP Calculus exam and scored a 4 or 5 on it. Right? You generally take those in high school, although sometimes in junior high. And your preparation for that is your AP class, right? You've got a specific class that focuses on that. Now, SAT 2s. Have you even heard about an SAT 2? SAT 2 is a subject test. It's basically the equivalent of an AP exam, and it's used for college placement and admissions. Right? Often you take these in the spring of your junior year, the fall of your senior year, and we'll come back and talk about them in a few minutes. Last set of exams on here is your EOC exams. These are the ones that are required by the state for you to get a high school diploma. And again, when you take them depends on when you're taking those specific courses. But the courses that you take in high school should prepare you for these exams. So let's say a couple more words about the SAT 2s. Not every university is going to require them. So what you want to do is look ahead, go to the College Board website, take a look at your toughest, most selective university that you're going to be applying to, and see if they require SAT 2 exams. If they do, we recommend that you take them at the same time you're taking the AP exam. So typically, there's an AP Calculus exam, there's an SAT 2 that's a calculus exam. There's language ones, there's history, there's French, there's kind of everything that you've got an AP exam for. There's also an SAT 2 exam for. And it makes sense that you take the exam at the same time that you're preparing for the AP exam. So you already have focused training in that subject area. So if there's any possibility you're going to apply to a selective university that's going to require SAT 2s, you should definitely be taking them at the same time that you're taking the related AP exam. Okay, now let's turn and do a quick comparison of the SAT and the ACT. All right, scoring. SAT, minimum score 400, maximum score 1600. You've got 2 individual sections, the math and the verbal, each with a range of 200 to 800, and the essay is optional. ACT, the essay is also optional. Here your composite score is 1 to 36, and it's actually an average, not a sum, of 4 test scores: your reading, your English, your math, and your science. Each individual score is 1 to 36, and then you average them to get your composite or your ACT score. Neither test has a wrong answer penalty, so for both of them you should just guess. Make sure you don't leave anything blank. The length is about the same. The SAT is 15 minutes longer. They both have 5 sections, so they both have reading. They both have grammar. ACT calls it English. They both have math. The difference here is that SAT has 2 math sections, one with a calculator and one without. ACT only has a calculator section. But what ACT adds is a science section, which is complex graphs. So it's not how much chemistry or physics do you remember, it's how well do you read and interpret complex graphs and data. And then they both have essays. The SAT essay is 50 minutes long and the ACT is only 40 minutes long. Completely different styles of questions for those essays. That's kind of a nice simplified overview of the 2 exams. So in terms of what they test, both test reading, math, grammar, essay writing. Right? They both test those homophones and frequently confused words. SAT has slightly more emphasis on vocabulary because it has 10 questions that will specifically be about vocabulary. ACT has more focus on science because it has that entire science section. Like we said, that's complex graphs, but that is something that the SAT doesn't have. Okay, in terms of math, they both test arithmetic, algebra 1, algebra 2, geometry, trig. What you see on the SAT, what you see more of is standard deviation, complex numbers, and dividing polynomials. On ACT, you see logs and matrices. But take a look at the number of questions and the time per question. This is going to be the biggest difference between the 2 exams. SAT has much more time per question. In this case, 23 seconds more per math question and 58 questions versus 60. Okay, science, there is no science, no complicated graphs on the SAT, whereas ACT, this whole thing is analysis and interpretation of complex data. Okay, they both have reading comp, and the reading comp is always passages followed by questions. Here again, the big difference is the SAT has 73 seconds per question, ACT only has 53 seconds per question. So that includes the time to read, and they both have basically the same number of words in a test, so relatively there's a lot more time on the SAT than the ACT. Grammar, same thing, right? Shorter grammar section on the SAT, but more time per question than on the ACT, but they test the same concepts. And then the essay. Both of them have the essay last in the test. It is optional, but as we mentioned, often required by the university, so make sure you check it out. SAT gives you 10 more minutes to write the essay, and the SAT essay task is analyze somebody else's argument. What did they do and did they do it well? ACT is analyze and integrate multiple perspectives. So you have to generate your own argument, but then interact with 3 other perspectives on that particular topic. So 2 very different styles of essay prompt. Okay, the bottom line is that most universities accept either exam. Most scholarships accept either exam. Both offer score choice. Both test essentially the same stuff. So the summary is the 2 exams are basically equal but different. Right? They test almost all the same concepts, almost in the same way. Benefits of the SAT, more time per question, only 4 choices in the math, whereas ACT has 5. Benefits of the ACT, right? You can use a calculator on all the math questions, and there are no graphs in the reading and grammar sections. So, separate but equal. We've already said this, but we'll reiterate it here. We recommend that you take both exams, the SAT and the ACT, to maximize your chances of meeting either entrance or scholarship requirements, right? Because you might just miss it on one and just make it on the other exam. So give yourself 2 opportunities to make those cutoffs. And then secondly, preparing for one exam helps you prepare for the other, because there's so much overlap in content as well as format and how these things are tested, right? As you prepare for one, you're preparing for the other. But you do need to do some separate preparation. You need to know what the ACT essay looks like. You need to know what ACT science looks like. You need to know what those dividing polynomials looks like on the SAT. Right? So the things that are unique, you want to make sure you take a look at so you're not blindsided when you take the exams. Okay, so last page. Thank you for doing this practice test. Congratulations. If you'd like more information on the SAT, we're directing you to the collegeboard.org website. It's an amazing site, tons of information. It's free, it's reliable. If you want to know more about the Knowsys blog or the Knowsys resources that are available, please visit our website, myknowsys.com. And then if you're looking for our products, feel free to email us, but also check us out at Amazon, apps, Kindle. Right? We've got lots of ways that we can help. We wish you the best of luck, and we look forward to working with you in the future.